We'll start in about a minute. Just a few heads ups. So for the workshop portion, we decided not to kill like 70,000 trees and just have the Google Doc worksheets up via this link. You can grab that now. It'll also be on the slide when we actually start the workshop if you want to type it in. If you don't have your laptop with you, use it as a networking opportunity we're going to be in groups of 2 or 3, I think probably 3. So buddy up with that. If you really don't want to talk to anybody, we have printer paper that you can use to write down the prompts. What else? Am I missing anything? I don't think, yeah.
I think we're just going to get started. People will straggle in as the minutes go on. So my name is Luciana Morais. I am one of Witlingo's lead VUI designers, and this is my colleague, Brielle Nickoloff, also one of our lead VUI designers. And what we're going to do here is we compiled a very quick background and workshop to get you guys and everybody started on VUI design. Can everybody hear me well? Okay, cool. Can everybody see this okay? Seems a little faded. Are we okay? Okay. All right, so I'm just going to get this kicked off and started. And is everybody able to access the presentation right now, just so you have it?
If you have problems accessing it, raise your hand and we'll get you set up. Like not right now, or when we get to the workshop, we'll go around and make sure everyone's got it.
I mean, we're going to show it over here anyway, but just in case. All right, so let's get started.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that we've been attending these events and we've been talking to people and getting to know what it is that people want to learn. So since we're VUI designers, we discovered that a lot of people are asking us, okay, hey, how do you actually come up with a process of designing an Alexa or a Google Home or a conversation, basically? And this presentation is going to focus mostly on assistant presentations, not on chatbots. We're not going to go over chatbots, just to give you that background. And so we kind of pulled this together today. Originally, we had a different presentation for you guys, and then we thought, okay, there's a lot of demand to know how to actually design from A to Z. So we compiled this today and said, okay, I think we got something legit. But I really want to know feedback from everybody at the end of this presentation. So the first thing, and I come from a background in UX, all right? So especially user research, and I am a big believer in knowing who your users are. And a show of hands, how many people over here have gone through or enabled a voice app of some sort that just sucked? Okay? Why do you think that is? Can I call on you, sir? Deliver what the user wants, right? So, okay, so one of the things that we do for clients sometimes is that we try to teach them that user research, you cannot skip this step. At the end of the day, you are designing for your user. So I'm going to beat this as much as I possibly can, that users are absolutely the key to your success. So let's start with research. So I want you to think about this. Much of what you will do with voice actually requires you to wear your product manager hat first. Okay, that's the first thing that you will do, is doing the entire understanding, the research, the ideation of what is it that you're going to build, answering that question, what am I building, okay? First thing is voice, even for me, okay? The user can, for example, think about the use cases. You want to design for something where the user can ask simple questions and can retrieve and comprehend that information quickly. For example, Alexa, what's my to-do list today? And you also want to consider about how hands-free do you want your app to be, do you want your conversation to be? Do you want the person to be completely engaged with your assistant entirely through voice, or do you want some sort of a combination of multimodal, visual? Is there any other component that you need to think about, especially when you're dealing about AR and VR right now? So for example, a hands-free approach would be someone like a driver looking for the nearest gas station, surgeon asking for patient information, a mother or father changing a diaper and needing to do something at that moment. I mean, you're obviously not hands-free while you're changing a kid's diaper, so this is a pretty decent use case for building a voice assistant. Okay. Another thing is accessibility, right? This is we've seen a lot in this event, a lot of focus on health, and especially for accessibility and helping disabled people to complete simple tasks. So think about that type of use case as well. Also, when you need to design for frequency, so maybe you are designing something that you expect your users will need to use very often, like timers, like alarms, bus schedules. That's something that's a very good case for voice as well. But you kind of, for the time being, while the natural language processing actual industry is growing, try to avoid things that are complex, especially data, unless you are synthesizing data analytics and just giving the output as a result. But anything that requires a visual breakdown of information, such, for example, as analytics, even to a certain extent, say, for example, you are booking an airplane, a ticket for a flight, a lot of people would still like to compare visually the times, the dates, to make sure that they got the correct ticket. Sometimes voice can be add a little bit more of a hurdle when it comes to these types of use cases. So what to think about when designing for voice? First thing you need to do, of course, is define the problem. What is the problem? Who is having this problem? How will your solution solve this problem? Is there a better channel other than voice for this problem? So I think a lot of brands and a lot of anybody who's jumping into voice are very excited about it, and it's a good thing to be excited about voice. Not everything is a voice solution, so that's something to think about. There are other channels that you can use that might be better for this. So think about those things. So will voice improve the access to this solution, or will introduce new hurdles? Does it even require voice output, or do you want to, for example, do you want to just turn on the lights? For example, do you want, this would be something that has to do with Internet of Things, that has to do with smart homes. It may not necessarily need a voice output, it's just an action that you see happening at that moment, okay? Another thing, define the user. Who will use it, when, where, how often? Are there physical or cognitive constraints? Are they global? Think about that as well, especially data speeds in international countries, platform availability, cultural context, language, accents that might impede the efficiency of them using a voice assistant. What platforms are available to your users? For example, Alexa, Google Home, is it a mobile device, etc. Do they need the experience to be completely hands-free, like I mentioned before? Will they respond better to a voice talent or out-of-the-box voice? That goes into a little bit of persona, and I want to talk just very briefly about personas. Who here has a background in UX and product design? Just a show of hands. Okay. Who's familiar with an idea of a persona? Okay, so for the rest of you, you want to design two types of persona. You want to design your user persona, which is basically a picture of your, not necessarily your ideal user, but your most common user, the target market that you're aiming for. But you also want to design a system persona, and that is the character, the traits, the life of your assistant, what it will sound like, how will it talk, the patterns of speech. Basically, you're creating a character. So those are two types of personas that you want to create. And just keep that in mind as well. Let's see. And finally, can they access this information somewhere else? I think one of the last things that you kind of want to do, especially if it's critical information, let's say, for example, you're creating critical information for health or critical information for an emergency situation, anything like that. Is there another channel that your users can access this information in should anything go wrong with their voice assistant? So keep that in mind as well. Obviously, privacy and security. I don't think, does it need to be private? How do you discover what users consider private? Okay, so what kind of content do your users consider to be private? If we're talking about health, we're talking about possibly about relationship situations. What is private to your user? Figure that out. Environment and setting. What is the environment like? Are users going to use this at home? Are they in a car? Are they in loud places? Are they in places where the connection is spotty? Keep that in mind as well. Do you need to worry about certain cultural issues, especially when you're dealing with designing things globally? So for example, let's say that you are designing a conversation for someone in ultra-religious type of religious settings and whatnot, it may not be okay for them to be speaking to a female assistant, with someone with a female voice. That type of cultural issues and whatnot. Your images too are a big deal. Especially if you're using multimodal figure, make sure that your images are not insulting anybody, are not weird to anybody. Especially if you're dealing with humor, make sure that your humor, keep that type of conversation carefully designed so that you're not, again, insulting anybody, or that you just want your users to understand the joke that you're putting out there. So just keep that in mind as well. Multimodals, how dependent on visual output does your voice experience need to be? What about troubleshooting? So troubleshooting is a big deal. So say, for example, you're designing a app or a conversation that's supposed to benefit the senior citizen community, okay? And voice is growing very exponentially within the senior citizen community. But if you put a lot of your information onto multimodal usage, you might actually be throwing an extra hurdle for that senior citizen who now has to go to their mobile device to either troubleshoot or to solve any other, or to access information that should otherwise be on voice. So keep accessibility in mind as well. Finally, scalability. How do you plan to scale it? Is this just a one-off type of conversation that you're designing, or are you going to be implementing monetization or building upon that skill over and over? Keep that in mind as well. All right, so we're gonna take a moment to do a really quick playtime. So here's what I want you guys to do. Your client wants you to design a peanut butter and jelly sandwich skill. I want everybody here to get in teams of 3, get to know one another, introduce yourselves, talk. We're gonna take about 7 minutes to do this. Come on. Just introduce yourself, get into teams of 3. Okay, are we ready?
All right, so the task. Someone is going to be Alexa, someone is going to be the user, and someone will be observing and trying to figure out where things go right, where things go wrong. So design an experience that will fulfill a user's need to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, never having made one before. It needs to have at least 3 different utterances. So Alexa, user, pairs in the conversation. The user will start the dialogue with something like, hey Google, or hey Alexa, how do I make a PB&J? And then go from there, see what you think the user needs and how that flow should look like. So we will be taking volunteers or picking one victim at the end of this, just so everybody knows.
Okay, so take 1 minute right now and discuss with your new friends what are some usual users' needs for someone who has never ever made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and is now using your Alexa skill to do so. 1 minute, counting.
Get my phone. Got it.
All right, time, guys. Time, time, time. Okay. All right, so next thing. Find your Alexa, find your user, and find your observer. Sign that right now. Take about a second to do that. Assign that. Do we have that? Good? Oh, okay, just do your best over there. Okay. Okay, so next thing. I want you guys to start writing a sample dialogue. All a sample dialogue is quite literally what it sounds like. A small component of what your conversation what you intend your conversation to sound like, okay? Let's focus on about, let's say, 7 lines. Have it be Alexa, user, that back and forth. Aim for it to be as natural of a conversation as possible. We're gonna time you on 7 minutes. Start.
Feel free to flag us down if you have questions.
We are debating what exactly influence means. Is it
We had one question just now. The way we define, hey guys.
Hey
one
guys.
Second.
1 second.
Really quick. Hey guys.
Hey, party table out at the back.
Table that's having a lot of fun. We
Yes,
had
you
one
guys.
question, just want to clarify. How do you define one utterance? It's just a single turn. So if I say, hey Google, how do you make a PB&J? That's one utterance. And then Alexa responds with whatever she says, single utterance, and then it's the user's turn for another utterance. Does that make sense? Okay,
You got about 4 minutes left.
yeah.
have until 3:30.
We have 2:30 to, wait, tell me your start 2:30? We have 2:30 to 3:15.
One minute. What do you? Yeah. Okay, guys, so can we get one volunteer group to tell us how that whole experience was and what they learned and to present their script? And, all right.
I'll bring it up. Can you guys stand up and introduce who is the assistant, who is...
Yeah.
So everyone can hear.
Hello, everyone. My name is Antonio, and I played the user.
Hi, I'm Sonali, and I'm playing Alexa.
Awesome. Alexa, I would like to make a PB&J sandwich.
That sounds yummy. The ingredients required for that are peanut butter, jelly, and bread. Do you have the ingredients, or should I guide you to the nearest store to get the ingredients?
Yeah, I got it all right here.
That's great. Let's begin. You need equipment to make this. You just need a knife and a flat surface. Have you got that ready?
Yep, got it ready.
Great. Now take 2 slices of bread. Dip your knife into peanut butter and apply it on one slice. Take a fresh knife, or if you want, use the same one to dip it into jelly and apply it on the other slice. And place them on top of each other. Have you got that?
Hold on. Got it.
Now take a big bite and enjoy your peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Good job. That was fantastic. I loved how you guys made sure to kind of be aware of the context and make sure the user was prepared to do everything, and that you didn't just say, okay, first step, get your bread. You made sure that they had all the ingredients, right? One thing is when he was actually making it and he said 1 sec, that's a very interesting part of the conversation where you need to allow the user to, you need to set the user up to know they can let the skill close out and then reopen it where it closed out, or if Alexa's just going to hang out and like play music or something, like that's a decision you'll have to kind of make as a designer. So that was an awesome job, guys. Loved it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for that. It's extremely brave. All right, so we're going to keep on going. So testing for voice, so fast and cheap techniques. One of the things that you just saw right now was role-playing. So you had an Alexa and you had a user that carried out the conversation. It's as simple as that to start your first testing and to see if your conversation actually flows easily. And if you noticed, hers was very, very conversational and very friendly. It was like, ooh, that sounds yummy. That's really great. You want to kind of have that little bit of personality on something that is supposed to be fun, which is cooking and making something for yourself like that.
One thing that we can't stress enough is that writing something out on paper, is not the same as acting it out with somebody. You're only going to discover really crucial things that you need to address as Alexa or Google once you've acted it out with somebody else or heard it just aloud. So text does not cut it when it comes to voice.
Yeah, absolutely. But even though, yes, sometimes text doesn't cut it, one of the things that you can do to further look into your conversation is actually texting back and forth. Even though that's more chat body, it still helps you to see if your questions are being answered, if the flow is working. So you could do something like that. That's an actually cheap approach as well to do. Now this is the Wizard of Oz. So I'm going to try to explain what this is. Basically, someone acts like Alexa, but they're kind of hidden, almost behind, and they try to act as much of the Alexa dialogue as possible. So the user, the person who, for example, an actual user feels like they are talking to Alexa, but they're not. They're talking to an actor at that moment who's pretending to be Alexa. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Video. So usually these works pretty well if you have a demo. If you can get a programmer to put a demo up for you, or if you can use a tool, for example, such as BotMock or any type of tool that will able to create that conversation for you, you can actually record an actual user through his or her experience with your conversation. So this is pretty fast as well. You can do this, of course, over a screen sharing device or any other way that you're able to capture that video. Okay. So I'm going to talk very briefly about measuring voice. And the important thing about this is that you have to have your goals pretty much set about what it is that you want your users to complete, to be able to complete and to accomplish, and how you define that value as you start to measure voice. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those metrics. You want to take a look at task completion rates, the number of users who successfully, for example, ordered a pizza, error rates, perhaps the system heard the user but returned an error, number of enables, number of invocations, calling out your skill or calling out your action, ratings, of course, number of dropouts, how often does the user give up, that's what's asking for, number of interruptions, how often does the user get cut off the system, okay? For example, this is indicative of long sentences in your script. So, for example, let's say that your conversation to your Alexa gives you output that is very, very long-winded, or you give a very long-winded response back to Alexa. Alexa might cut you off. So at that point, you might want to look at your script and iterate on your script, decrease the amount of words and the verbiage and whatnot. Try to keep your dialogue as simple as possible.
A lot of these are workarounds for having actual data because all of the major platforms right now hosting these assistants, basically Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Amazon. Did I say that? Yeah, Apple, okay. They don't release user transcripts, right? That's a violation of data. So you kind of have to work backwards and say, okay, if lots of people are falling off at this intent, then we can go in and figure out why that is. You can't just understand it through the user's speech because we don't have access to that right now as designers or developers.
Okay. Utterances, this is pretty key. Utterances is all the possible responses that our user can give the assistant. And these, as designers, we spend a lot of time trying to come up with all the possible responses that our user can have for any type of conversation, okay? So for example, you want to watch out that maybe the user isn't speaking your language. So in a sense, for example, with the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, let's say, for example, that he would say something like, I want a gluten-free peanut butter and jelly sandwich, is that even an option? Or Alexa might say something like, do you have grape jelly? He might say, no, but I have peach jelly. Is Alexa going to be able to accept that, right? Those are that type of utterances. Number of no matches. This is when the system clearly hears the user but has no response. Sometimes you'll see number of no matches. Again, with utterances, for example, asking for peach jelly, and it's not in the system, that will be a number of a no match, and you want to incorporate that into your script as well. Latency is how long it takes your system to provide feedback that the user has heard. In other words, you say, yes, I'm ready to make this peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and Alexa comes in 2 minutes later. You know, something ridiculously long with a response. Watch your latency. You don't want it to be too quick. You don't want it to be too slow. And make sure that you gear your latency to the age group that you're designing your app for. So for example, senior citizens, kids, anyone that might need a little bit of a delay to think. Anyone who's new, completely new to voice, might need just a little bit of a moment before they have to respond. Number of help requests. Now, with every single any kind of conversation that you create, have a escape button for your users, and that's usually what I call, or the red button. Have a help component into your script as well. If they start invoking help a lot, find out why. This is it should be pretty indicative that something is wrong with your conversation. Visual errors. If you're looking into multimodal, are the images broken? Is it wrong images? Check into that. Quality control that as well for visual errors. I'm going to pass this on now to Brielle. She's going to carry you into the next workshop.
All right, so if everybody could type this link in, it will lead you to a Google Doc. And on the very first page of that is some use cases that you'll be able to design for this workshop. Cool. We're going to pull it up on here too. Can you, if you don't want to do it on your laptop, you can just follow along on the screen and we can grab you guys paper and you can just write it out. So raise your hand if you think you'll be wanting paper. Oh, go back to yeah.
Sure. All right.
Cool. Cool. And you can just use the same groups that we did for the PB&J.
Does anyone need paper?
All right, so is everybody seeing page 1 use cases? Good? Can you raise your hand if you are not? Okay. Are you going to follow along just, okay. You can actually even look off of mine. Oh. All right, so we've given out 2 options for you to, oh yeah. Luciana, could you actually pull it up on the screen now? Thank you. 2 options to kind of design a minimum viable product, which is just a few functions that you want to give the user that relates to a specific use case. So here are your options. A user choosing a recipe and then being walked through the different steps. And the second one is getting information about camping and hiking in Yosemite, or like whatever national park of your choosing. So be as creative, as broad, as narrow as you want in using one of these use cases. If you really want to try something completely different, I'm not going to stop you. We just wanted to give everybody something to start with. And right above, you'll see this chart that can kind of help you evaluate the functionality of what you might want to choose. As we mentioned before, sometimes if there's too many data points you need from a user, if you're booking a reservation for a hotel, there are just a lot of steps. So if you can figure out a way to make that streamlined and easy, then yeah, have a stab at that. But try to make sure that you are going to under-promise and over-deliver for your user, and frame every utterance, every question in a way that will set them up to succeed. So if you scroll down to page 2, we've got some questions for you to start thinking about with whatever use case you choose. So collaborate as a group, choose a use case, and then start thinking about who your users will be, what value you want to deliver with it, how frequently someone might be able to use it, and is a voice-only device with no screen involved a good fit for it? And if not, then what other function might you be able to focus on that would be a good fit? All right, so yeah, let's get going on that, and definitely flag either of us down if you have questions, clarification questions, anything. Oh.
Students today.
Hey everybody, if you haven't moved on to page 3, please do so. I'm going to repeat that. If you haven't moved on to page 3, we're running out of time, so start on that. And one question we've gotten, what is a fast follower? That's in the first question, I believe. A fast follower is somebody who tries out your skill or your action and starts using it very, very often thereafter. So say somebody invokes it the very first time today, and then you see them using it 5 times today, and then every day for the next week. That's just somebody who is a fast follower. And what we're getting at with that question is, how do you redefine the experience for somebody like them versus a first-time user? Would you shorten some questions? Would you explain things a little bit less? Would you provide less context because you already know that they understand your skill? They've used it many times before. Yeah, and if you have questions about that, let me know.
So we're actually going to wrap this up because we only have about 6 minutes before we have to go, and I think somebody else is walking in. I think they're already lurking outside.
Okay.
So we're going to switch.
We started 15 minutes late.
Yeah,
so
sorry about that, guys. But we are going to fast forward to design, and
we
I'll
will
pass it on to
speed
Brielle.
through design at light speed. Let me grab the... All right, so designing a voice experience. As I said earlier, especially with the limitations that we have with technology right now, we need to under-promise and over-deliver on what you're giving somebody. You need to frame every single utterance from the assistant in a way that the user knows exactly what they can say back to it, what their options are. And then thinking about making your experience robust. There's a million ways for somebody to ask you how to buy flowers. And you're not going to be able to think of every single one, which is why you constantly need a user test. Sometimes you need to be creative with the ways that you're coding it into the system. For example, the other day, we were working on a skill, and the question was, should I just play all the songs? Should I tell you the names of the songs, or do you want to hear them all? And every time I would say, I want to hear them all, she would misrecognize it and say, I don't know what you mean. And that's because she was recognizing it as hear the mall instead of hear them all. So we stuck that little user utterance in as hear them all, and that fixed that problem. So it's kind of like a creative troubleshooting process still at this point. That's kind of what I was talking about with the utterances. So there are a lot of things to keep in mind with voice design. Do you want to go back to present? Every voice interaction that doesn't have a screen is so time dependent because you hear something and then it's gone. You can't see it. You can't scroll. You can't look through your options. You don't have menus. You need to provide every single menu to the user and every single utterance that you give them. Sorry, I'm whizzing through this really fast. We don't want to go over time. But so it's non-persistent. So you need to make sure that you are giving them exactly the right amount of information, but not too much information. And that can be a really hard balance to strike. When you anthropomorphize something, this gets tricky too, because humans love to anthropomorphize everything. It's the way that we can relate to the world best. So by using theories from conversational discourse and Grice's maxims, he was a philosopher/linguist, You can try to make your designs as robust as possible. And those, I can't go through all of them right now, but for example, one is that, that idea of just enough but not too little. Giving them just enough to go and understand and know, and making sure that they know everything they need to know. I'm gonna skip that. What makes voice compelling? I'm pretty sure everybody here understands this, or you wouldn't be at voice. There are just so many different use cases that voice can allow for. It flattens navigation. Instead of opening my iPhone, trying to unlock it, go to the app, figure out that app's interface, look through different, like if I had to think right now, where would I be able to find storage in my iPhone, like the storage setting? I don't know where that would be. I kind of have an idea to go to settings and then like kind of look through general maybe, or maybe it's in some other place. With voice, I just say, go to storage, and you're there, which is really cool. That has to do with that. So one way that we can address the time linear problem, avoiding long prompts, short lists, chunking your questions, and by that I mean instead of saying, do you want hot dogs, hamburgers, or pizza? Because somebody might say yes, like I do want one of those things. You say, do you want hot dogs or hamburgers, or do you want pizza? Chunking it in ways that make it so the user knows how they're supposed to answer. Shortcuts for repeat users, that's kind of the fast follower question we addressed. Summarizing when it is a very crucial piece of information. And for example, if it's a transaction, you really want to make sure that you're asking users for confirmation at least once or twice. If you're going to purchase a $7,000 puppy, you want to say, are you sure you want to do this at least a few times? And arguably, those use cases may not even be fit for voice at this point. All right, anthropomorphizing. You clear, brief, and orderly. That's just a key tenet that we keep coming back to because, as somebody mentioned earlier, they were putting too much personality into their assistant, and it got a little bit cumbersome to listen to. So it's important to try to create a personality while still being really concise and not lengthening the prompts unnecessarily. All right, and we probably don't have time for the design workshop, but you guys all have access to the doc if you'd like to take a stab at writing the user Alexa/Google script. Go ahead, the resources are open to use, and thank you all for coming. We hope you learned a little bit about ideation, research, design when it comes to voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One thing, Witlingo, we designed the Voice Summit Guide Alexa skills. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out, enable it. This is basically, we used everything that we just taught you to put that together. So take a look at that. And just connect with us if you have any other questions and whatnot. We're going to leave the docs open for a while, so do what you will. Download, keep them to yourself as resources. All right? Thanks so much.
Oh, yeah. With the Voice Summit skill, you're able to listen to different speaker bios to kind of hear what they're about, what company they're from. So that's kind of a cool feature that if you want to check it out, you can.